When I was 6 years old, my family took a walk outside our apartment after dinner. Me and my parents started at the same pace, chatting about what happened during that day. But once in every 10 minutes or so, I stopped. I stopped to squat down and observe ants moving in a line. It was something very simple, but for some reason, it grabbed my attention. A few minutes later, I looked up and saw that my parents were way ahead of me. So I ran to catch up with them, but moments later, I ended up being distracted again. I was a child full of curiosity, who was intrigued by almost everything. And I'm sure I was not the only one who was like this. At one point of our early childhood, every single one of us have been full of curiosity. According to the article, Why Curiosity Leads to Creative Breakthroughs, curiosity is a part of human nature that helps our growth by enabling us to learn many things. After bouncing a ball a few times, children learn about a force called gravity that causes the ball to bounce less and less. After turning a fan on and off, children learn that the swirling motion of the fan is what provides the cool wind. After tasting a piece of lemon, children experience the electrifying taste of sourness. Although we may not have thought about it this way, curiosity has definitely led us to learning many simple principles of life and nature. In school, I asked a lot of questions, and this helped me go beyond what I was required to know and help my education become more like an adventure. During math class in 3rd grade, I was working on an addition worksheet where I had to add up 2 double-digit numbers together. I learned that when the first 2 digits added up to more than 10, a 1 had to be added to the next digit. But the more I thought about it, this addition rule didn't seem to make a lot of sense. It just seemed like such a random rule. So I decided to ask the teacher why the addition rule was like this. And she kindly explained that because another 10 was being formed, a 1 had to be added in the 10th digit. After listening to my teacher's explanation, I achieved a better understanding of addition. Just like when I learned why a 1 was added to the 10th digit, when I asked questions and mastered new concepts, I felt a sense of accomplishment. According to the Scientific American, curious minds have an increase in the activity of the brain circuit related to reward, called the hippocampus. In other words, when we are curious, we're able to feel rewarded after learning something. Feeling rewarded while learning is similar to solving a difficult problem. When we solve a difficult problem, the process can be tiring and long. You may even think about giving up. But once you solve the difficult problem, you feel proud that you were able to persist through. Learning is the same. The process of learning can also be quite tiring, tough, and difficult. No one fully understands a new concept or a new idea the first time they encounter it. We have to wrestle with the idea, ask questions, think deeply to fully process the new knowledge. But once we are able to fully process the new knowledge, we feel the same kind of proudness. And when our learning is accompanied by curiosity, that reward at the end can become much bigger because we've learned something about something we've dreaded to know about. Curiosity was a huge part of me during elementary school, and no doubt it has helped my learning by letting me engage in my education. But as time went by, I realized that my curiosity had disappeared. It was as if I woke from a long, deep dream, finding myself missing something. In middle school, my urge to ask questions disappeared. I refrained myself from asking questions because of one reason: fear. I was afraid that the question I had in my mind could be redundant or stupid. This was because after entering middle school, I experienced and seen many people getting attacked by a teacher after asking a question. Didn't I just explain this? Keep your questions until the end. There's no need for you to know this. And many of you may relate. This is why, even if we want to know something, even if there's something we want to know that's bothering our minds crazily, we keep our mouths shut and keep it to ourselves. This is what prevents us from maintaining our curiosity. Now that I was aware that I had lost my curiosity, I wanted to find it back. But being curious wasn't as natural or easy as before. I needed to rebuild my curious mindset. But how? What causes people to be curious? Questions. Questions spark curiosity. But it's impossible to ask questions out of nowhere. Questions start somewhere. And that starting point is an observation. As I've mentioned earlier, children will be fascinated by everything. Sometimes they will be looking out into the blue sky, or they will be staring at the hard wooden surface of a table. But after observing something for a long time, they will start firing questions at you. Why is this? How is that? Why is this? What is that? And as absurd as it may sound, we need to learn from these children to be observant like them. But observing something and just looking at something are two completely different things. Observing something, just looking at a leaf, is mentally noting that there's a leaf in front of you. But when we observe a leaf, we're closely looking at the leaf from different aspects. After observing the pointy shape of the leaf, we ask, why are leaves shaped that way? After observing the deep, dark green color of leaves, we ask, why are leaves green? By observing, rather than just looking at something, naturally, we can start to think, wonder, and ask questions, which essentially is the same thing as being curious. But what is so important about curiosity in relation with our learning? I've already mentioned earlier that being curious can make our learning more rewarding. But there's a much more significant reason to why curiosity is important in our learning. Many students complain about going to school. Of course, school can be stressing at times because of assignments, assessments, and pressure to get good grades. However, stress shouldn't necessarily translate into boring or dreadful. Playing a basketball match can be fun, can be stressful, but at the same time, it can also be fun. Edutopia states that when we are curious, our brains produce a chemical called dopamine, which is a chemical known to help our memory. But the funny thing is that dopamine is also a chemical partly responsible for our happiness. In fact, the reason why drugs are so addictive is because drugs affect the level of dopamine in our brain. So by being curious, not only can we learn with more efficiency, but we can learn with joy. And that's the power of curiosity, being able to learn with joy. With curiosity, anything can seem interesting. One day I was reading an article on something, and I looked at a sentence structure of a really long sentence. And while doing that, the commas in the middle of the sentences grabbed my attention. Why is it that in one sentence there are a lot of commas while in another there are none, even though both feel like they need a comma? I started becoming curious and wanting to know more. But I didn't actually search up the information myself. During English class, we learned about the usage of commas. And during that class, I didn't need to try to focus because the class was already entertaining. Whether we are learning something completely brand new or whether we are diving deep into a subject that we kind of knew about, or whether we are just trying to understand a difficult concept, if we use curiosity as a tool, we can see the joyful side of learning. Many of us have been learning, having forgotten the curiosity that once lived inside us. We need to wake up this curiosity within us. Because after all, being curious isn't that hard. All it requires from you is for you to take observations. And by doing so, something magical can happen. You'll be able to find that inner child full of curiosity. You'll be able to find fascinating things within the most boring things. But most importantly, you'll be able to find your learning delightful. Thank you.